This episode of Wheat Pete's Word is brought to you by Miravis Neo from Syngenta. You can trust Miravis Neo to protect your corn against diseases like gibberella ear rot and tar spot. Miravis Neo is the only corn fungicide solution that delivers yield and quality all in one jug. Visit syngenta.ca for more info.
Good day and welcome to Wheat Pete's Word here on Real Agriculture for Wednesday, July the 10th. On this episode of the Word, corn tasseling. Oh, baby, big wheat. And then agronomy answers on diseases, weeds, crappy soybeans, as well as new recommendations. Just so much to cover, so let's get to it. Let's go! And I will start off on a bit of a sad note, but really to honor a great man. Dean Clay Switzer, University of Guelph. Dean Switzer, we called him at the University of Guelph for many, many years, the Dean of Agriculture there. And he passed away last week, really unfortunate, 95. A quote from Craig Hunter, worked with Craig, but there's just not enough good words to eulogize such a person. He was an inspiration for generations of Aggies and a champion for Canadian agriculture. Just excellent words, Craig. Hats off to Dean Switzer for an incredible career, a true loss to Canadian agriculture, but such a contribution to the industry. All right, gonna move on and talk about cool stuff, good stuff, rain. Yeah, baby. Believe it or not, I know there's still areas fighting to plant. It's most of the crop is in the ground now. Even in those areas, I think that they didn't get planted. They're probably done at this point, but a lot of areas starting to get dry, and it's really interesting because you start to notice, right? The wheat crop, now it doesn't need the rain, but the corn crop is in its rapid growth phase, and it is using a third, well, maybe not quite yet, but a quarter of an inch of water per acre per day, going to be up to a third of an inch of water per day, and 2 inches, give or take, maybe on really good soil, 2.5 inches per foot. If the corn crop has roots 3 feet deep, you don't get rain for a couple of weeks. It starts to go dry, as well as some areas in Bruce County. So all of that to say, yes, Hurricane Beryl and lots of rain. That's an awesome thing. Brett saying, so Peter, we got 2 inches. How long will it last? Well, Brett, just do the math. Let's say every inch gives you 4 days at the stage of your corn right now. So you have, 7 to 10 days out of 2 inches, and you'll need some more rain. But gosh, just going to keep that crop cooking. And the good crop looks amazing, and the tough crop, it just looks tough. Meanwhile, corn is tasseling. Both Joe and Nature Nut Nick emailing me. July the 8th, we have full season field corn. We're not talking sweet corn. Already, I believe there's sweet corn coming to market. That's Wheat Pete's favorite. But wow, April planted corn, July the 8th to tassel. That is incredibly early. You just go, man, that should be excellent corn. It's going to do grain fill through long days, warm temperatures, should be early harvest as well. Lots of things good on the good corn, that's for sure. Meanwhile, let's move on to the wheat crop and big wheat. So Jan has been emailing me all along the season. He's really taken an interest in wheat. And he said, I'm going to manage that wheat. He put nitrogen out there, nitrogen and sulfur out there in February, I believe, was his first application. Remember, incredibly warm February, and we wouldn't normally do that. In fact, this is probably the first year in my career, but he managed it all the way through. His test field, his backfield was his test field, 173.3 bushels per acre over the scale. His farm average, 152.4. Man, one thing about wheat, if the weather can smile a little bit and you manage it, it responds to that management, and that's exactly what Jan did. Phil in Indiana reaching out with some nice words. Thanks for those, Phil, but also saying, back in April, he just decided, listening to this yen talk, he was too late for the yen, but he said, I'm going to give it. I'm going to listen to what they're doing in the yen. And that guy, Wheat Pete, 132 bushels per acre on his wheat crop, and that is 30 bushels better than he has ever done before. So there are some awesome wheat yields out there. In fact, the worst wheat yields that I'm hearing are sort of average, and that's where they had way too much water or it lodged really early. So it is looking like a good wheat crop. Hopefully it stays that way. Hopefully Wheat Pete's not jinxing it, and we get some dry weather now that it's rained to get the crop out of the ground. From that out of the field rather. From that perspective, what about quality? So far, quality is actually really good, even though many growers, Wheat Pete himself started combining wheat on July the 8th. That is a never before that Wheat Pete has started in the single digits of July. In fact, I think the earliest before was July the 17th. So that's massively ahead of normal. But I look in the bin and the sample is just ugly. Normally early harvested wheat looks really good. The sample this year is already looking ugly. Fortunately, and I'm hearing that, by the way, from many growers, it just isn't a pretty sample in the bin. There's vitreous kernels, there's already black point, there's mildew, and that just tells you through the dry down period that we've had lots of humidity, lots of moisture, but the falling number has been remaining strong. We do see some FDK, fusarium damage kernels, in the sample. So Jason, you asked about fusarium in wheat seed. Could you keep that wheat for seed? The answer is absolutely, but it's there, so make sure you treat that seed. Otherwise, you get fusarium seedling blight, and it will spread from kernel to kernel to kernel in the row when you plant it. So important to treat seed that does have some fusarium damaged kernels in it. But so far, strong falling number, good test weight, and almost no dawn. So no toxin, even though we see FDK. The fusarium is in the sample at low levels so far, but no dawn. So that is a really good outcome. Get it out of the field before the dawn can develop, because that's a challenge. But yes, so far to date, the wheat crop is wonderful. Meanwhile, straw, I'm getting lots of questions about straw and value, and the quantity of straw this year is huge. The straw is so tough. I went to the field on July the 8th. The straw was just almost wring moisture out of it. And yes, that means the old 9500 combine spit a bit out the back. I just could not go slow enough not to lose a few kernels out the back end, but get it out of the field while the quality's good. So Johnson drove on. However, on straw value, as I said before, it looks like 4 to 6 cents a pound, and Bern Tobin and I are going to do a video, hopefully this Friday, on the nutrient value of straw, so pay attention to Real Agriculture when that goes. We'll give you more update on that at that point in time. All right, I need to move on and quickly talk about hay, because, my gosh, second cut hay, a lot of growers actually saying that in southwestern Ontario, the second cut hay yields are as big as they normally get for first cut hay. And that's after a record first cut crop. Many growers just wondering, what do we do with all this hay? Trying to find more storage or selling it. Like, there's just the hay availability, the hay quantity out there is phenomenal, and that's another great thing. Hey, before I move on, Donald, you left me a message, and you just a terrible connection. So whatever you said, I have no clue. You'll have to leave that message again. All right, let's get on to the agronomy answers. I need to start with tar spot. So we talked about that last week. As of July the 4th, Albert Tenuta found it in Ontario at his normal site in Elgin County, where we found it first for so long. Since then, since July the 4th, it has been identified in a research plot at Thorndale, or between Thorndale and St. Mary's. So now we are northeast of London. That's important. Also in Essex County. But why do I say Thorndale is important? Because to date, we haven't seen huge tar spot pressure early in the year. north of about number 7 highway, or almost not even north of London. If we are finding it now in that Thorndale area, that means that it has moved, that we have enough from the residue from last year that we are starting to see it show up earlier in that region. So that's what's going to happen with tar spot. It's going to continue to move east. It hasn't gotten to eastern Ontario yet, but even there, you're going to have to start paying attention, because early in the U.S., big spore load, quite likely, hurricane moving those spores right down through eastern Ontario, likely to get some spores landing. 2 weeks from now, you might find the very odd tar spot lesion. It probably doesn't mean that it builds up enough in 2024 that you need to control tar spot. But it does mean that we have to start paying attention, and it is going to move. And so now the people that are south of number 7, almost for sure we have it as an issue. And that means as we go north and east, people are going to have to start watching it for it and having it in their management program. So here's the bottom line on this. Make sure that you download the app Field Prophet, Prophet, because just because you get the spores, I mean, the spores may come with the hurricane. They may go to eastern Ontario this year. It's too early for eastern Ontario to likely have a problem, but nonetheless, you could get the spores. You still need the right conditions for infection and for that disease to actually sporulate and cause additional disease. It takes 3 life cycles, as I talked about. Don't forget, it's hours of leaf wetness. 7 hours of leaf wetness. The more days that you get 7 hours of leaf wetness, every time you get 7 hours of leaf wetness, that means that the spores can infect. They can start that cycle. And when we have really bad outbreaks, it's always when we get lots of leaf wetness, from the time we find those first spores on the corn leaf right through till tassel and all the way through actually to maturity. So the bottom line on this is download Field Prophet. The Prophet is spelled Prophet. That is the app from Damian Mason. He's the app guy in the disease world. It's got Sporecaster. It's got Tar Spotter. You can put in your location. You can put in your tasseling date or your flowering date on soybeans for white mold. Lots of predictive tools there that will help you determine what your tar spot risk is once you know that it's in the area. So know that it is now in the area, certainly south of number 7 highway and maybe further north and east than that. Okay, I want to move on, and I got a hit on herbicide-resistant weeds. So 2 things. Virginia Jansen's at the Oxford Soil and Crops. She tweeted it out as well, but she talked about finding her first field of water hemp in Oxford County. And at the end of the day, if you are seeing pigweed or what just looks like a weird pigweed or a bunch of weird pigweed, the chances are that it is water hemp, and you need to know and do something about it. They did try to spray that field once she found it, but trying to catch it at the size that it was is just about impossible. It will help. You got to try, but we have to start identifying these fields earlier and controlling them earlier. So if you see those pigweeds, man, get on it. Talk to your agronomist, whatever. The other one, Aaron, sending in a sample of annual ryegrass, or actually ryegrass. We don't even know if it was annual or perennial or what it was. And sure enough, it is glyphosate tolerant, glyphosate resistant. And so talking with Mike Cobra, 14 of the 16 samples of ryegrass that have been submitted for glyphosate testing, 14 out of 16 have come back glyphosate tolerant. And we get into this big argument is, well, was it annual ryegrass? Was it perennial ryegrass? From Francois Tardif at the University of Guelph, he says that his old boss, Steve Poles, said that whether it's annual ryegrass, perennial ryegrass, rigid ryegrass, Italian ryegrass, they are all ryegrass, and they are all prone to developing resistance. It's just the nature of that particular genus. I think rigid is the worst. I mean, there's got to be differences, but for goodness sakes, keep annual ryegrass out of your cover crop mixes. Keep annual ryegrass or ryegrass, just period, out of your mixes when you're seeding down ditch banks, because it just comes into the field. Ryegrass seems to be becoming more and more of a problem for us, and I don't know that we can tell that one is okay and the other is not. It just seems to be a problem. All right, I want to move on and talk about useless soybeans. Oh my gosh, Paul sending me a picture saying, hey Peter, what do I do about these potassium deficient soybeans? So really interesting. As we move north, I'm seeing more and more potassium deficient soybeans when we get into the drier areas. Down here in the deep southwest, where there's lots of rain, I don't see any potash deficiency. And it's as if the plant has other issues than potassium deficiency. Where it's gotten dry, if you have low soil potash, dry soils, the potash gets tied up in the clays. It's not quite as available, and so we end up with potassium deficient. The easiest way to fix that, from Horst Bonner, our soybean specialist, just go broadcast 100 pounds of potash, like 0060. That's the easiest and best way to fix that. You can try with foliars, but you just really have trouble getting enough potash in the plant. Tom saying, hey Peter, in these wet areas, my soybeans are still yellow. Would it help to go out there and add some K20S, a foliar product? So Tom, that yellowing is not potash. That yellowing is the same yellowing that Dr. Dave has. And Dr. Dave asking a great question of Horst Bonner. He has tile-run soybeans. And poor Dave, he's such a perfectionist, and he knows so much about agronomy, and he's such a good farmer. And his farm near Belmont is right in the middle of the worst excess rainfall through April, May, June from Ag Canada. He said the map came out, and right there in his farm in the middle of this big dark red spot with way too much precipitation. Meanwhile, that gives him tile-run soybeans, and he's saying to Horst, we used to say there's no benefit at all to putting nitrogen on these tile-run soybeans. And in the old 2021 article, Horst basically said you put a little bit of nitrogen on, and it just isn't enough nitrogen to really help. As well, it tends to give you too much growth over the tile runs, and now you've got disease pressure, particularly white mold pressure, so the economics didn't drive it. Horst coming back saying, hey, we have reanalyzed about a bunch of this data. There's two things that we know. Number one, those soybeans that are between the tile runs, they are not nodulating well, and they need sulfur to make those nodules. They're also deficient a little bit in nitrogen because they don't have nodules and they've got poor root growth. And so the data now would say to go out and spread 100 pounds per acre of ammonium sulfate on those soybeans, and that the data says 3 bushels per acre. So by the time you drive over it with the 100 pounds of ammonium sulfate, it's sort of an economic wash. But if you want them to look better, that 100 pounds of ammonium sulfate is worth looking at. The other thing that Horst has also looked at, so this is for the growers listening in that have just phenomenal soybeans, Horst has reanalyzed all of his data, and for years we have said nitrogen on soybeans doesn't pay, and just don't bother with it. It isn't going to work. And we've done lots of trials that would support that. But as Horst goes back through his data, he reanalyzed it and looked at it, and he talked about this at Diagnostic Days at Ridgetown campus last week. And he said, if you are into high-yielding soybeans, the soybeans just cannot fix enough nitrogen. The soil can't provide enough nitrogen. And there does look as if there is a 6 bushel per acre yield increase to applying nitrogen on those soybeans. Now, the amount of nitrogen Horst was adding was way crazy high. And so the jury is still out on how much do you have to add. Greg Stewart going through the math, it kind of looks like you need 30 pounds more in the plant, which would mean 60 pounds of actual nitrogen, because we never get more than about 50% use efficiency of applied nitrogen. That means the plant can only ever find and pick up half of what we apply. So 6 bushels, 60 pounds of nitrogen. It's a real thought process, but you want to start talking about plots. Man, Dave, you've got yellow soybeans, try the 100 pounds of ammonium sulfate. If you have phenomenal soybeans and you're not a white mold problem, trying some nitrogen, maybe it wouldn't be all bad, just to see if we couldn't increase those yields just that little bit more. Hey, just on that note though, Woody's saying, Peter, man, the carbon penalty. So Dave, I think this is part of your problem as well. The carbon penalty under these wet soil conditions, it's as if the soil bugs, because it's always wet, they're able to work more on the corn stover. Normally, the corn stover is on the soil surface, particularly with guys like Dave Hooker, Woody Van Arkel that don't do much tillage. So that carbon is on the soil surface. The soil surface dries out. The soil bugs can't get at it anymore. And so they quit using all the nitrogen out of the soil. This year, with all the rain we've had, Woody, with his corn on corn followed by soybeans, right beside his sunflower corn followed by soybeans. So 2 years corn versus 1 year corn. And guess what? The 2 year corn soybeans are noticeably more yellow and shorter. And that is a carbon penalty that normally goes away. It just hasn't gone away in 2024. Just before I go, and this is getting way too long, but Mark down in Delmarva sending me a picture. Man, when it's dry, if you have irrigation, it pays huge. The difference in the greenness index of that was incredible. So the people in Bruce County that were super dry, you need irrigation. Hans out of Romania sending me some pictures. In Romania, they had 3 years of drought. It's still dry there. They've had super heat, and they just are struggling to get good wheat. One of their biggest problems, low test weight. But it's such a dichotomy. In Europe, we have the UK and Denmark that are they have had excess moisture, and then as we move further east into Romania, into areas in Russia, and it's this year, or actually third year of drought, and so quite a divergence as you move through Europe. And so once again, I've gone on too long, and no, I'm not going to go. That one caller said, hey, Peter, rather than talk too long, maybe you should do 2 shorter words, or do 2 episodes a week and make them shorter. Not going to go there. I just don't know why. I'm just not going to go there. With that, that's it. That's all on behalf of the team here at Real Agriculture. This is Wheat Pete with the word for Wednesday, the 10th of July. Get the wheat crop off. Keep the messages coming. And I will once again talk too long next week. See you then.
Thank you for downloading this episode of Wheat Pete's Word, brought to you by Miravis Neo from Syngenta. You can trust Miravis Neo to protect your corn against diseases like gibberella ear rot and tar spot. Miravis Neo is the only corn fungicide solution that delivers yield and quality all in one jug. Visit syngenta.ca for more info.